this difficult. To do that, I mostly have to strip away the many misperceptions and wrong concepts that people hold, sometimes preciously so. And so they become a bit angry that I'm taking those away, and they sometimes aim that anger at me. So this is a general discussion. I can't possibly give individual medical advice, nor would I try to without all the information we normally have. And as I always say, before starting any new medications or supplements or new programs, you want to talk with your personal physician who knows your situation best. And as I said, this is pretty complex material. I want to start with apologizing to the people I called old at 40 when I was 18. Right? None of us really realize what it's like to get older until we're there. Groucho Marx said anyone can get old. All you have to do is live long enough. So I'm going to help you to get to that point. Now, this is a quote I use a lot in my life. This just really resonates with me. I have seen the spectrum of what happens in people's lives over my 40 years as a clinician. This is from William Dawson, who said, "The life that conquers is the life that moves with a steady resolution and persistence toward a predetermined goal. Those who succeed are those who have thoroughly learned the immense importance of plan in life and the tragic brevity of time." The reality of it is we all think we have an endless parade of tomorrows, and it turns out that's just not true. If we want to improve our probability of tomorrow, we have to act today on the things that keep us healthy. Now, I'm fully aware that each of us has an expiration date, so to speak. That expiration date is determined by God, not by us. But we are also moral agents in how we take care of the temple that we've been privileged with. And that's the point, the narrow point that I'm going to try to make. Now, brain health is equal to physical health plus mental health plus spiritual health. I'm going to be focusing by necessity today more on the physical health side of it. But I don't want to neglect mental health, primarily because my daughter, who's a mental health counselor, will she'll arch her eyebrow up in the same way her mom does. And of course, even more important to me than physical health is spiritual health. We are here much like the grass or a flower that will fade quickly, but we spend eternity for eternity, probably something obvious. Oh, another component of this is what we choose, what happens, what we would call, quote, accidents. There are no accidents to God, and genetics. But what you're going to learn today is that genetics plays a much smaller role than we tend to think. You'll hear people say, well, Doc, I've tried to lose weight and I can't. You know, my mom and dad were heavy, my grandparents were heavy. That plays a role. But it turns out not to be the predominant factor unless you let it be that factor. So I'm going to talk first about the brain and then more generally about the body. God issues you one and only one brain. We have no way to replace it or repair it, unlike other organs in the body. So you get one, and whatever happens to it, you're stuck with. So the brain determines almost everything else about the quality of your life, even the longevity of your life, your independence. So taking care of your brain turns out to be paramount. The goal here is long, independent living, high quality life. Now, while I think all my slides are important, this is truly the most important slide of all. The goal here is not what currently happens. We're sort of transitioning between that top line and the bottom line. Right now, we're figuring out ways of life extension. But for the most part, what we're extending is that portion of less independent, more morbid life, right? I'm just going to illustrate. I'm not poking fun or anything, but you probably don't want to live a long time like that. You want to be able to walk and converse. And so what we're transitioning to is longer life with a shorter period of morbidity before death. That's the goal. It's not just life for life's sake on its own. It's high quality life, if we could put it that way. Now, there's also some realities that is really interesting to me. I lecture around the world. It's in the West, and primarily in the US, though it's now spread to Europe, that we have this, I would call it a perverse and distorted youth culture, okay? When I grew up, I'm 68, when I grew up, there was respect for elders. They had something to offer and to teach, and so they felt valued. They felt a part of the chain of what happened in civil society. That's being eroded away. I'm well aware, it shocks me. There's an old joke, I may as well use it. It shocks me, how does it go? It shocks me to be as old people. You know, I once reprimanded a kid who zoomed through a crowd on one of these electric things. And, you know, the comment back was, "Oh, you're just old." What? I'm not old. Well, to him, I am old. But we have accepted this idea of normal aging as being one of continual decline. And I'm going to show you a few cases where that's just not the case. And in other countries, they are not the exception. They're more the rule. But we accept this. We adopt this moniker of old. And you can see it in people. They begin to do this. They begin, because they don't want to wear hearing aids, they begin disconnecting. They get depressed. They lose their curiosity. They don't know about world events. They can't converse. They don't have something to offer, a unique insight based on decades of wisdom and the school of hard knocks. This is not true in other cultures. This is because of this, as I say, this perverse distortion with youth. I mean, it shocks me the amount of money that people spend. Used to be just women, now it's women and men on looking younger while ignoring all the basics of what being younger means. And so we have this ageism. The problem is, particularly in the United States, and now we have imported it all over the world. I was a visiting professor in Beijing, and I was quite surprised. There was a Starbucks and KFC and Pizza Hut within a couple of blocks of most anywhere that we walked around in Beijing. Our lifestyle choices literally are killing us and prematurely aging us and our kids. We have the fattest kids in the history of humankind. We're number one in the United States. Number one in obesity, number one in suicide, number one in premature death, number one in maternal mortality, and all of the bad things. As I often say, how is this possible in the richest, most educated society that ever existed? And it need not be this way. Aging can be a very positive experience. To put a little joke on it, there are many, many great things about getting old. It's just that we don't know what they are. Well, let me give you one of these case studies. This is Rizzo. He is 95 years old. Last night, one of my colleagues, Ed Laskowski, who's been here and visited, he's a physician at Mayo Clinic and a physician for the winter U.S. Olympic team, showed slide after slide of people skiing. One guy, 96 years old. Olympians now who are in their 40s and 50s, but they have learned the secret of taking care of their temple. So why is this man 95 years old? Let me tell you about him. He starts every day without fail with a walk. He walks 30 to 60 minutes, about 7,000 steps, followed by strength and balance exercises. Nothing exotic. As my friend Ed said last night, you don't have to run a marathon. You don't have to lift heavy weights. It's nothing exotic. It costs nothing. In fact, it costs less to be healthy than to be unhealthy. He naps every day. He has healthy food in high social connection settings. It's one of the things I like about assisted living, at least down here, is you see the way that it's arranged with the dining rooms, et cetera, where there is social connection. That turns out to be very, very important. Viktor Frankl, who was a Jewish psychiatrist, wrote about his observations in the Nazi concentration camps. And the number one thing was social connection and hope. And social connection gives you hope. Social isolation tends to make you hopeless. And he has this, I can't pronounce it properly in Japanese, ikagi or something close to that, which is their word for the concept of a sense of purpose. Getting up each day with a sense of purpose is really important. Now, for the believer, we are very fortunate in lots of ways, but we have a sense of purpose. We can't ever forget Matthew 28. We are to go out and tell people, to teach people, to disciple people. And that can be done most anywhere. If you ever go out to lunch with Pete Lilback, he will always say to the server, "Oh, I got good news for you." And he pulls out of his pocket a copy of the Gospel of John, and he talks with them. Jean and I try to adopt that habit. We were last year in Atlanta, I think it was, and we simply asked our server, a young woman, we're about to pray for our food. Is there anything we can pray for you? She burst into tears. And we said, can you sit down for a while? And she told us about what was happening in her life, and we prayed. And, you know, I like to think that woman got up from that table and a seed was sown. I don't have follow-up to know what happened, but it's that easy. It can be done on the phone. I have a friend who's an evangelist. He's 86 years old. He's not able to walk very well after an episode of COVID infection, and he meets with people by Zoom and disciples them. So having that sense of purpose. Well, here's what normal aging is. We are slower to think, slower to do, maybe a little more hesitant, but we're also wiser. We're not going to leap before we look. We recognize the person but can't quite come up with the name, or might have to pause to find certain words. That's normal. What tips into now concern about is there a disease process going on is we can't think. We can't do. We can't get started. We can't even place a person. We don't recognize them anymore, or words don't come even later, or we're confusing the past with the present. Those are very different, and those are of concern. Now, this is of a lot of concern to civil society, government, and to physicians, because we are a rapidly aging society. Italy will get there first, but Italy right now has the greatest number of people over the age of 65. And as you know, 65 and older don't have babies anymore. So it's a self-perpetuating cycle of less and less children and more older people. When I was born in the middle of the last century, as my kids point out, there were about 33,000 people in the US who were over the age of 100. There are now well over 500,000 people in the US over the age of 100. This is, and as you can kind of see, look at the trajectory of that line. But along with that is coming dementia, loss of independence, because of our lifestyles and the way we live. So what is it that kills us in the US? The most common is heart disease, cancer, stroke, Alzheimer's, influenza and COVID, and suicide. Those are the diseases of aging in the US. And I would propose to you that all of these can be prevented or delayed, including Alzheimer's disease, by our lifestyle choices. But there's a problem here. I have faced this problem all my career. Like many areas of expertise, people often think they know, when in fact their knowledge base is incomplete or laden with misunderstanding. At the beginning of the pandemic, I was asked to meet with a lady. Her physician could not persuade her to take a COVID vaccine. She was at high risk. I talked with her, and at the conclusion of this, she said, "Well, I hear you, doc, but my neighbor's grandson says this." You see what happened? She was unwilling to let go of her own perception of her own expertise. And that's a very bad place to be, whether it's what kind of car you buy, what kind of insurance, what kind of doctor you see. If you think you have more expertise than the expert, you're very likely to be harmed by that perception. At the same time, that you know yourself best, and just be sure that you have all the information to make good decisions. And then the nature of human psychology is to reject data that is different than that which we hold. And this results, I have watched this all my career, in unnecessary pain, suffering, death, and other adverse consequences. Here's how it happens. It's called the ladder of inference. We start with reality and facts. Now, one thing I want to acknowledge is that all of our science is tentative. We're constantly expanding the scientific knowledge base. So there are things that I would tell you today, for example, about COVID, that will change 3 months from now, a year from now, whatever. That doesn't mean, as you hear people say, you guys don't know what you're doing. It means that the science base changes. The virus may be changing, whatever it is in whatever area of science. So we start with reality and facts. What happens then? Through the lens, it might be politics, it might be self-interest, it might be for economic or other reasons. People select their reality, okay? The most common thing we see in the US is people select that reality through the mouthpiece of someone that they admire. It could be a celebrity. It could be Fox or CNN, whoever it is. They select their reality based on that mouthpiece that's talking to them. They then interpret that reality through through lenses of distortion. They come up with assumptions. They draw conclusions, which become beliefs that they don't want to let go of, and they act on those beliefs. By the way, this is no different than what we as pastors face in religion and theology. For those of you that come to my Sunday school, we're always talking about, people hold on to ideas without even thinking about it that they might have heard in Sunday school, or they heard somebody on TV say, and they kind of incorporate and weave that into their own belief. And they can't get, to the next level, so to speak, because the only way to get there is unwind all this stuff behind it. All right, let me talk about the reality of brain health in the United States. By the way, I will stay here and answer every question. I'm in no hurry. I want to be sure I transmit this well and in a way that you can articulate it to somebody else. So the value of this is in the multiplicative effect of this. All right, let me show you brain MRIs across 4 different life periods. Up top is a normal, healthy adolescent brain by MRI. Young adulthood, still a normal brain. Here's what starts to happen in midlife. Do you notice that you begin to see the folds much easier than you do up top? Do you notice a certain shrinkage of brain volume that really gets more obvious at older adulthood? A good part of that is normal, but there are aspects of it that are abnormal. Let me show you another view of it. So here's a young individual. Here's an older individual. What we're seeing is that this white and gray matter begins to atrophy. That's why they can't find the word as quick. That's why they can't take in as much information. It's why they can't remember. If I want to remember something now, I got to write it down. And I carry a notebook. It's on my desk, but I have a notebook of things I need to remember to incorporate into something because I'll forget. If my wife interrupts me, not that that happens any more frequently than a couple times a minute, but teasing. If I'm talking and she interrupts me, I have problems remembering what it was I was saying. Have you gone into your walk-in closet or into your bedroom and said, what was it I was coming in here to get? I mean, that's normal. That happens. This is why that's happening. Now, I gave you the top 6. I'm going to give you the top 10 causes of death to go a little deeper. Number 1 is heart disease. Heart disease, with a very few genetic exceptions, is preventable. No one has to have heart disease. Now, when we say heart disease, I'm really talking about atherosclerosis. You can have abnormal rhythms that, yes, there are risk factors for it, but you may or may not be able to help. Cancer, we think some 70% or more of that is related to lifestyle, what you choose to eat, the lack of exercise in this country. COVID-19 is the 3rd most common cause of death. I know a lot of people don't want to believe that, but you can't explain away the fact. People try to, but right now, 1 out of every 270 Americans that was alive at the start of the pandemic has now died of COVID. Accidents may or may not be able to prevent that. Stroke, completely preventable. Chronic lower respiratory diseases, primarily COPD from smoking. Alzheimer's disease, diabetes, preventable. Chronic liver disease and cirrhosis, and then a variety of chronic kidney disorders. So in the US, this would not be true if we went into Africa, if we went into Japan, If we went into parts of South America, this is uniquely true in the US. Every 40 seconds, someone in the US has a stroke. Stroke is, as I just showed you, the number 5 cause of death. 80% of stroke is due to underlying cardiovascular disease. 99% of US adults have at least one of 7 cardiovascular risk disease factors. This just isn't true elsewhere in the world. 3 out of 5 US adults will develop a brain disease in their lifetime. That's the majority of us. I don't know if maybe this shows well enough. So what is it that's doing this to our brains? Well, one, we are living longer, and some of that, as I pointed out, is normal. What can you do about this? Well, eating right, which I'll talk about briefly and my wife will talk about next week, restorative sleep patterns, exercise. This and the eating are the big gorillas in all of this that I'm talking about. Eating correctly and exercising, being social, engaging your brain mentally, and managing stress. Look at all the benefits. Last night my friend said something like this. Look, if I told you, I got a pill that's going to make you more resilient, it's going to dramatically reduce your chance of dementia. It's going to reduce your healthcare costs. It's going to increase your ability to think. It's going to improve the quality of your life. I'm going to basically take away the risk of diabetes and heart disease and stroke. Would you take that pill? This is that pill. Exercise and eating right. And it costs nothing. I mean, food costs something, but no more than bad food, probably less. So what are the pillars, as we call them, of brain health? It's being social, being involved. I actually think some of the most important things are connections with people of a different age and different than you. People who don't believe what you believe politically, who don't believe what you believe about society or anything else, and having civil conversations where you really have to engage your brain and kind of debate back and forth. And that's the next pillar, engaging your brain. That can be new hobbies, it can be learning a new language, it can be crossword puzzles, it can be all kinds of things. Managing stress. I don't know anything about that. I'm going to race past that. That's my bad habit. Exercise, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Restorative sleep, that is a hard one as we age. It's happened to me. We joke, you get one good night's sleep, you pay for it the next day, and you don't sleep well. And there's some ways to manage that, and then eating right. So here are my optimal brain health rules, I think in terms of rules. No tobacco ever, for whatever reason. Never, ever. No tobacco. The data shows you are best off with no alcohol. You've all heard about, well, what about red wine? Red wine can be helpful because of the social context and the less inhibition, and et cetera. But it is not healthier than no alcohol. High quality, plant-based diet, regular physical activity, regular mental activity. We already talked about the social and sleep, and strict attention to and treatment of risk factors. So, how do I live 100 years? That's why you came here, is with that provocative title. I will give you my 10 commandments. Forgive the takeoff on it. But as Yoda the Jedi trainer said, do or do not. There is no try. You have to finally make a decision. I'm going to do it or I'm not going to do it. My mother quit smoking one day at age 83 or 4 after smoking since 16, 17. And now my sister quit one day. You have to finally make a decision that this is it. Now, on a long enough timeline, the survival rate for all of us is 0, okay? But again, we want to make good quality life as long as possible. So, as believers, treat your body as God has commanded us, as a temple. Moderation in everything. My daughter and I were talking in the car. What's it called again? Orthorexia. These are people who have gone way overboard in dietary patterns. That's not healthy. Way overboard in exercise is not healthy. So moderation, Grandma was right. Like anything, invest in yourself for the long run. It is compounding interest. And let me say, because we're mostly people above the age, I hope I don't offend anybody, above the age of about 55 or 60 here, it's not too late. I don't care if you're 90 years old. It is not too late to start making changes and benefit from those changes. Don't be fooled by marketing. There just isn't. And I know this is one of the points people get disappointed in me. There is no quick fix. There just isn't. I guess if you said, well, what about a statin for high cholesterol? Yes. But otherwise, there is no quick fix. It's compounding interest. You don't get rich quick unless, your dad's rich and dies and leaves it all to you. You get rich slowly. You get healthy slowly. You stay healthy slowly. Slow and steady wins the day. Western and traditional medicine is the most advanced in the history of the world, but it doesn't have all the answers, and I'm the first to tell you that. We do, I think, a spectacular job with people at Mayo Clinic, but we don't have all the answers because we don't have all the data, and we never will have all the data. We will just keep incrementally improving. Well, in Matthew 7, and again, I'm misappropriating here to make a point. Enter by the narrow gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the way that leads to destruction. And there are many who go by it. Because narrow is the gate and difficult is the way which leads to life, there are few who find it. I actually think this is helpful, not only in our spiritual health, but in our mental and physical health. We can choose the broad, easy way that all the culture is on, and it looks fun, and no one's going to poke fun at you because you follow the crowd, but it is the least intelligent of the ways to go. Now, I mentioned about genes before. The true heritability of the genes that influence happiness and longevity is only about 7%. I think that surprises people. The implication is that accidents and lifestyle choices are what kills us. So some suggestions to start, and I don't get anything from Apple for this, but get an Apple Watch or something similar to that. Here's why I'm suggesting it. Wear it at night. A lot of people get one and they don't wear it at night. Wear it at night. It tracks your activity level. It tracks your heart rate and your heart rate variability. It tracks your sleep time moderately well and the quality of that sleep. It tracks mobility changes over time, the symmetry of how you're walking. And it detects falls, it detects oxygen concentration, and it detects sleep apnea and abnormal heart rhythms like atrial fibrillation. Atrial fibrillation is one of the primary causes of stroke. The majority of people that develop AFib are not aware of it. I cannot tell you the number of times somebody's come in for a routine exam and I'm taking their pulse and, whoa, this person's in AFib. Don't you feel it? They don't. Back in 91, I had a brief episode of AFib. I knew it immediately. It's a very abnormal feeling rhythm for me. But a lot of people can't detect it. An Apple Watch will detect it, and it means we can treat you before a stroke happens. And it is critical to maintain vision and hearing acuity. I know people don't want to wear hearing aids. Get over it, is the way I would put it, and get hearing aids if you need them. Spend the money for good quality eye care. If you need a cane, get over the idea that I don't want to look old and have a cane. It will probably prolong your life and your independence. Every time it snows up in Minnesota, I say to my wife, I dread it because one of my patients is going to fall. They're going to go to surgery. They're going to break a hip, and they're not going to go back home. All right, my 10 commandments or rules. Number 1, eat right. So what are the total calories you should be taking in? Don't exceed it. Eat health-enhancing foods. These are tree nuts, fruits, vegetables, especially the highly colored veggies. I had the opportunity to brief President George W. Bush at one point in my career. He doesn't like broccoli, and I kidded him about it, which he laughed about, fortunately. Whole grains and fiber. Avoid toxins. This is going to surprise you a little bit. Animal fat, except for fish. Salt, sugar, high fructose corn syrup, which is in everything, it seems like. You ready for this one? And then I'll duck. Red meat. Some places are now labeling red meat as a health risk because of its risk for being a carcinogenic agent. So to me, red meat is a condiment and an occasional, not a routine. In America, people eat, if you have 21 meals a week, a lot of people eat meat 21 times a week. If it wasn't food 100 years ago, it isn't food now. Grocery shop in the periphery of the aisles, and my wife and daughter reminded me, stay away from the end caps. That's where they're trying to push new foods on you. If it tastes good, spit it out. My wife will correct that next week. If you can't pronounce the ingredients, don't eat it. Buy local, fresh, and as best you can, organic. Why do I say that about the periphery of the grocery store? Because it's the fruits and vegetables and grains and cheeses and breads that are on the periphery. The junk, for the most part, is on the inside. Now, a real problem we have in the US is what's called ultra-processed foods. These are the foods you see up here. They're the ones that we all have a taste for now and then. And I am not saying you can't have a cheeseburger now and then. But if you have a cheeseburger every week, that's bad. That is going to decrement your health. You get to choose that if you want. And there's some parts of it I can reverse with statins, for example. But I can never give you optimal health if that's how you eat. Same with all these sugary drinks, these French fries fried in these fats. And you can't read all of this, but it's meant to impress you with just how much damage those foods do. There's another problem. This came out in the New England Journal yesterday, and this is having a tremendous ripple effect in medicine. They reported on 278 people who had carotid endarterectomies, where they stripped the fat out of the inside of the major artery going to the brain, in 58% of them, they found micro and nanoplastic particles. If they found microplastics, they had a 60% higher risk of death, heart attack, and stroke. We were trying to recount in our food stream what doesn't contact plastic now. It's a problem that we're going to have to figure out as a society. If you look at what happens with these ultra-processed foods, this will sound a bit paranoid. The reality of it is, and I know firsthand, these mega corporate food companies are producing foods to taste good, fat, sugar, and salt, because they're addictive, and you'll keep buying them, even though they know it harms your health. And they cannot solve the underlying reason why many people eat these things, which is stress, anxiety, depression, frustration. I mean, I'm the same way. When I'm stressed and frustrated, I'm an eater. Other people in my life don't eat when they're stressed and frustrated. Look at the risk here. When people eat these ultra-processed foods, the risk of diabetes is 40% higher. The risk of cardiovascular, 35% higher. Hypertension, 23% higher. Almost a 30% higher risk of dying. Obesity, about 50% higher. Cardiovascular mortality, 66% higher. Is it worth it? I always tell my patients about these risks, and I tell them, this is not me. This is a decision you have to make. But I will tell you, I have never, ever had a patient come back when they're in the ER or in the ICU and say, "Doc, it was worth it." Never, ever. They want me to do everything I can to extend their life or try to reverse what's happened. But they can't let go of their bad decision making and what they think are the facts. And that's a problem. We lead the world in ultra-processed foods. 60% of our diet in adults in the U.S. is now ultra-processed foods. In children, it's about 70%. I never saw in my entire career up until recently type 2 diabetes in a child. Now the pediatricians tell me routinely they see this. They have had to learn how to manage diabetes in children, which was rare. It's the obesity that results from these ultra-processed foods and the lack of activity. Now let me show you a study. This is a systematic assessment across 195 countries that concluded that a poor diet was linked to 22% of all deaths. That is more deaths than tobacco, cancer, hypertension, or any other medical condition we know about. It's food. It's what we do with food and how we eat. So, what does it show? In this 195 countries, they looked in 2017, there were 11 million deaths, and there were 255 million. These DALYs are a measure of quality of life that were attributable to diet. High intake of sodium was responsible for 3 million deaths. Low intake of whole grain, 3 million. Low intake of fruit, 2 million. And we in the U.S. we have the leading dietary risk factors for death. We now have more people in the world that are overfed than underfed. And I think that's a moral problem, particularly for us as believers. Lord Byron said, we lie more to ourselves than to anyone else. So, because this is almost ubiquitous in people's thinking, we've done studies at Mayo where we have taken people and put them in what are called clinical research wards. They can't get out. They agree that they won't leave, that they can't get out, and nobody comes in without being screened so they don't bring any food in. So we completely control their diet, okay? All we hear is, well, I've diet and I can't lose weight, doc. When we put them on a diet that they think is more food than what they're used to eating, every single one loses weight. What they're losing is fat weight, not muscle weight. So it actually does work. All right, rule 2, only eat on the days you exercise. What I'm getting at here is regular activity. Getting your heart rate to 70% of its maximum, a minimum of 20 minutes, a minimum of 3 days a week. So for me at age 68, my maximum heart rate is 150. I can't really get to that. I'll pass out if I get to that, but you're not supposed to get to that. My target heart rate zone is between 50 to 85% of that, meaning a heart rate of between 75 on the low end to 128. When I run, and I run regularly, I usually get into the 130s, despite the fact that I'm on a medication called a beta blocker, which suppresses your heart rate. And as I say, okay, you get 1 day grace a week. But otherwise, truly, if you think about that, like I won't take a donut, because if I take a donut, it means I got to run 2 miles longer. And when you start doing that calculus, the decision making gets easy. That doesn't mean you can't cheat once in a while. That's fine. But human nature is once in a while becomes regular. All right, here are the 10 benefits of exercise for us as older adults. We maintain our independence. We manage our weight. We reduce our health risks. We improve brain function and mental health. It promotes mood and energy. It enhances our sleep health, which is a problem we all share. Strengthens mobility and flexibility, and improves our body image. And oh, by the way, increases sexual function. All right, rule 3 is to maintain ideal body weight. Significant deviations either way are adverse to health. So it's a U-shaped curve. Who has the highest mortality rates? The very thin and the very overweight. Obesity is the epidemic of the 21st century. It is literally killing us and our children. It makes it hard to move and exercise. It establishes a vicious metabolic cycle leading to medical complications and further exacerbated by a sedentary lifestyle. And the truth of the matter is it's very hard to gain weight on vegetables and fruit. It really is. You will feel satiated. You will feel full before you can eat enough of those things to gain weight. And by the way, I don't want anybody to feel embarrassed or shamed or anything like that. That is not the goal. That is not even healthy mentally. That is not even a good motivation for making these health changes. It's awareness and education, and then making good choices incrementally. Crash diets don't work. They do not work in the long run. Slow and steady wins the day. More on rule 3. Stop eating when you are 80% full. I'm wrestling with this one. During the pandemic, even though I was active, my weight went up because that was a stressful time. And what do I do when I'm stressed? Eat. My wife will say, by the time it got to 4 o'clock, I'm saying, are we going to have cheese and crackers? Maybe some chocolate, honey? I've been really good today. And the role of food insecurity. So I grew up with food insecurity. There was not enough food once my parents divorced, a single woman in the 60s and 70s, we just didn't have, and there was not enough food. It breaks my heart to not clean my plate. My grandfather, who grew up during the Depression, used to say, you don't know when you're going to eat next. And when you're 6, 7, and 8 years old, I believed him. Oh, wow, I'm hungry now. If I don't just eat everything, I might not get food for another couple of days. So, you know, I've had to change my thinking about food. Another thing is that the data on caloric restriction and fasting, frustratingly, it works. That's bad news for me. It's very hard to fast. I have fasted as long as 3 days for theological reasons, but it's not easy to do. And I don't think that fasting is a good long-term solution. I think slow and steady is the right way. Now, one of the things that we have come to realize in medicine, and you have to realize that we're playing catch-up. Never before in the history of Western medicine did we really have to deal with overnutrition. It was always undernutrition. So we're learning a lot about this. And one of the things that's clear is that the human body, human physiology, is very poorly adapted for overnutrition. It just doesn't work. We are not pythons where we can eat this whole table full of food and then not eat again for a week and a half or 2 weeks. It has adverse effects on us. Rule number 4, prevention of disease. A lot of you, and I told my patients too, to take baby aspirin as primary prevention. And now we don't do that anymore. Aspirin is for secondary prevention. What that means is once you've had a cardiovascular event, then we use aspirin. But the risk of bleeding is too high before you have a cardiovascular event. So we don't use it with few exceptions. As I said, alcohol, none or minimal. If it's going to be alcohol, make it red wine. Thank you, Lord. Dark chocolate turns out to be good for you. I know. And it turns out that within reason, the health benefits increase with more intake. This, brothers and sisters, is a cause for rejoicing. But dark chocolate, don't be fooled by the marketers, right? We want 70% is ideal, but 60% or more is okay. Vitamin D supplements are very popular down here, I notice, and we don't think it's a good idea unless you are an indoor living northern person and you can't get outside. We still use it in combination with calcium to decrease fracture risk with mild osteoporosis. But having said that, let me tell you that that paradigm is rapidly changing. The studies are equivocal on that. I still think it's okay to do if your physician has told you that, but I'm even saying it very cautiously because I believe that's going to change in the near future. Adequate hydration. My daughter set my alarm to drink because I have a very poor sense of thirst, and I have gotten into trouble. I rode, it was about 96 degrees, and we were going to ride 100 miles on our bikes. By 96 miles, I was shaking like I was cold and almost incoherent because I was acidotic. Never during that whole range did I have a sense of thirst. So if you're like me, drink enough water. Now, there are some reasons to drink a lot of water, but it is a myth that you have to have 8 glasses of fluid by noon or something like that. The best judge, assuming you have normal kidney function, is that your urine should be clear to light pale yellow. It should not be dark yellow. If it's dark yellow, even though you don't feel thirsty, you are dehydrated. Now again, be careful with that. If you're somebody that has congestive heart failure, different set of considerations, but otherwise. The other thing that's very popular in the US are supplements. And here's the second time you're going to be angry at me. Most of it is junk, is the clearest way I can say it. They are not FDA regulated. Multiple studies have been done. We have gone into stores, there are all kinds of these health supplement stores, I won't mention their names, and we've pulled off randomly some of these supplements. About a third of them are talcum powder. About a third of them have homeopathic doses of active ingredient, meaning meaninglessly low doses. About a third of them have toxic contaminants. They are unregulated. They are not the magic bullet that the marketers would have you believe. All kinds of studies are being done, and they don't help. Now, there are some exceptions. There's a recent study showing that a daily multivitamin in older people can delay dementia by as much as 2 years. Which multivitamin? I would only take a multivitamin made by one of the big pharma manufacturers like Merck or Pfizer. They are more expensive. There are some occasional times when we would recommend zinc, maybe, or people who have had bowel surgery where we have to replace other things. But all of these supplements designed and marketed to give you more energy, that's all placebo effect. I think I said most of this. This is a multi-billion-dollar business. Same with the weight loss stuff. The goal is winsomely market the concept of take a pill rather than the hard work that I've talked about. And if it worked, we'd all be on them. It doesn't work. Now, as I said, there are some exceptions. Absorptive disorders, malnutrition, right now for osteoporosis, and I just mentioned the specific vitamin that they studied in that study I mentioned of delaying the onset of dementia was Centrum Silver. Now, some more things that people don't like. If you have high cholesterol, statins. Best way is diet, but most people in the US are not going to be adherent to a diet, and so we add statins. I take a statin myself. The trick is find the right one that doesn't cause adverse side effects for you. The statins are in different classes. The fact that you tried one and it didn't work for you doesn't mean they're all the same. They're not. Antihypertensives. Once your systolic blood pressure crosses 120, you have increased your risk of stroke and heart attack. So getting that blood pressure done, ideally by decreasing sodium in your diet. My own blood pressure, I'm telling you my own health, just to motivate you that, this happens to doctors too. My blood pressure was creeping up with age. My dear wife put me on a low sodium diet. I now have to be careful sometimes because my blood pressure will get too low. I would much rather do that than take 1 or 2 or 3 antihypertensives, which all have some level of side effect. And people don't realize how much an example, a slice of bread has more salt in it than a slice of bacon. You don't know that because it doesn't taste salty to you. Become a label reader and you'll see just how much sodium is in the American diet. It is why we have so much hypertension in the US. Atrial fibrillation as you get older, tends to become the rule rather than the exception. But we have great ways of treating it and of preventing the stroke that can result from it. Diabetes treatment, treatments for obesity and overweight, and one that's really common and people don't know, which is why an Apple Watch can be helpful, which is sleep apnea. If you don't wake up ready to go, if you're sleepy during the day, if I had a patient tell me, Doc, I got to do something. And I said, what's wrong? And he said, if it's a long red light, I fall asleep. Now he had really severe obstructive sleep apnea, but those are signs of having sleep apnea and the need to treat it. Well, that gets into the proper sleep. It turns out you need 7 to 8 hours of sleep a day. We're all a little different. It is rare that I sleep 7 hours. And I don't know how much of it is habit. I mean, all during my career, I slept between 5 and 6.5 hours. And I just rarely can I sleep past 7 hours. I had one patient who had long sleep syndrome. This is actually known genetically. He slept 3.5 to 4.5 hours and he was fine. But those are rare exceptions. I've seen one person like that in my 40-year career. Part of the problem is our hyper 24/7 information overload. Everybody I talk to about this thinks they're an exception. No, it doesn't affect me. But the data are clear. It does affect us. Turn off your phone. Turn off all the electric equipment at least an hour before bedtime and read your Bible instead. There's a person in my household who scrolls the news instead of reading Table Talk. We'll leave it there. Do you realize that in the 1940s, people routinely slept 8 to 10 hours a day? Who here can sleep 10 hours a day? That was routine in the 1940s. What's changed? We're still the same humans. By the 1950s to 70s, it was 7 to 8 hours. By the 1990s, it was 6 to 7. Now, robust sleep studies show that people are sleeping only 4 to 6 hours a night. That is not good for our health. We are not built for that. Rule 6.
Grace?
Yes.
Why don't we take a stand-up break?
Okay, you want a break?
Yeah,
Some people need to go to the bathroom.
Take 5 and
all right.
Be back here in 5 minutes.
Take 5. We are getting near the end. Uh-oh, did I gore a sacred cow?
No, okay.
That's my next slide.
Yeah.
feel its benefit? What are the ways that there's just
Some of those things that
every other or every third wall? Because when you take an aspirin, you're decreasing the stickiness of the platelets. And that lasts for about 20 minutes. So taking less often might be that right balance.
one thing I believe, I've got to ask you, this strong
Yeah.
heart rate of 70%. They got to find out what kind of gizmo.
Oh, measure your heart rate.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. She's gonna talk about that next week. Yeah. And I see it. Right? I mean, you're in good shape. Well, you can't help that, I am too. I mean, that's just, unless we devote 3 hours a day to exercise, and that's not gonna happen, nor is it necessary. Yeah. It's important. Yeah, he was the door guy.
What do you think about?
Yes. Oh, key.
How do you fit that in?
That's what, when I showed those 6 pillars, one of them is that social engagement.
But their studies are over 60 years of age. I mean, they show it's far and away.
Yes.
So how do you weight that in your own building?
You mean like saying what proportion for each one? See, the problem is those factors have what are called confounded. When you're highly social, you've already selected people who can be social. And then
I read those studies.
you're talking about for the longitudinal study.
Yeah, for the longitudinal studies, I mean, they find that the successful aging.
Right, so they're interconnected. Right. That's what I mean, they're confounded. But it's a good.
All right, why don't we get back together again?
No, it does make a difference. They're all important.
Their studies, which are yeah, you betcha.
That's what I'm saying. Those are confounded together. So you couldn't, if you took all those other habits away and just had social engagement, you wouldn't find that.
No, but you took social engagement.
All right. All right, we're going to get back to it now. All right, rule 6 is to screen and prevent disease. So here's what it looks like for males. Getting your PSA checked, a lipid profile, cancer screening like colonoscopy, bone density by the time you get to age 70, vaccines, hearing and vision testing, fasting blood sugar, and ECG. And we're learning more and more the role of dental care. Turns out that the health of your oral health impacts your brain health, for example, and your cardiovascular health. These are pretty similar for women with the addition of a mammogram. We're much more aggressive in bone density screening for women, but otherwise pretty much the same. And a lot of people fear those tests. They don't want to have them. They find them embarrassing or, other reasons. But would you rather have some temporary embarrassment or metastatic colon cancer? I mean, those are the choices that it comes down to. Now, I'm going to hit on diabetes because this is the thing that, we're spending all of our time medically now treating, this and hypertension. So look at the risk of diabetes by age. This only goes to 2016, so it doesn't show the sharp uptick in the younger kids that I was mentioning. But look at this risk of diabetes. Why should that change over time? If it hadn't changed over time all the way back here, what is it? Yeah, it's processed food, it's being overweight, obese, and all the other risk factors that we talked about. Now, diabetes is very likely to shorten your lifespan. The magnitude of that shortened lifespan is dependent on when you are diagnosed with diabetes. So we want to delay that as long as possible. If you're diagnosed with diabetes in your 70s, you're about 39% more likely to die from any cause compared to someone who doesn't have diabetes. If you're diagnosed with diabetes in your 30s, you are 169% more likely to die prematurely. It has that kind of effect. This is from a very large study that was published in The Lancet. Now, there's some differences in males and females. Females always have the longevity edge because of estrogen. If you're a male and you're diagnosed with diabetes in your 30s, you lose on average 14 years of life. So again, every decision we make in life has consequences, good or bad. And we get, on things like this, we get to choose. Do you want 14 more years of life? Or no, you want to enjoy your cheeseburger every day and your ultra-processed foods. If you're a female, you lose on average about 16 years. So with an average lifespan of 77 years in the US, that's between 18 and 20% of your lifespan. So it's well worth it. So what can you do? Well, a 10-year follow-up study of 170,000 people in the UK Biobank showed that those who achieved these optimal lifestyle metrics, including good sleep, were 95% less likely to develop diabetes over the coming decade. 95%. I do not have a pill that's this good. It doesn't exist. There is no pill, there is no procedure that can duplicate this. That's how important lifestyle is. Now, this is a graph that shows metabolic equivalence, which is a measure of physical activity and the hazard ratio for diabetes. The higher your exercise or your metabolic expenditure, the dramatically lower your risk of diabetes. You can't get away from this as much as we might want to. Now, people always say when you talk about METs, well, what does that mean? Well, these are some examples. Light gardening gives you about 2.3 METs. That's good. That's good. You do not have to be doing these things. You do not have to go out and jog. Being active, in fact, the newest data is even 10 minutes of activity a day has demonstrable benefits. So if you're not at risk from walking, park over there and walk in. At the grocery store, park back. And if you have a nice car, park next to somebody with a nicer car. This really does work. If we take these various factors, they call them here the simple seven. If you compare highest to lowest risk, just normalizing these things like cholesterol, diet, weight, 64% risk reduction. Again, I don't have a pill like that. That's how powerful this is. All right, well, that was the UK. What about in the US? This is 719,000 US veterans. These are mega studies who were between the age of 40 and 99. And they looked at them, it's called the Million Veteran Program, from 2011 to 2019. They identified about 33,000 deaths over a follow-up period of 1.13 million person years. These are mega studies. Men who adopted the lifestyle factors we've talked about by age 40 lived almost 24 years longer than those who did not. Women who adopted them lived 23 years longer. This is powerful stuff. And in fact, you can look at the adjusted risk factors for mortality. So we were just talking about positive social relationships. You get about a 5% bump from that. What about for not smoking? You get about a 30% bump. These are important risk factors. If you look at mortality per 1,000 person years for these various health factors, and I don't have room to list them all, but for people who adopt all of the factors that we've just spent about 40 minutes talking about, their rate of mortality was 7.4 per 1,000. Those who didn't adopt any of them, tenfold higher risk of death. All right, rule 7, stress and mental health, increasingly important factor in our culture. Avoid toxic people, avoid toxic situations, avoid most all of TV. I'm serious. The more hours you watch in TV, the less healthy you are, the more depressed you are, the more anxious you are. There's some exceptions, maybe a documentary or the History Channel used to be something good. I don't think it is as much anymore. And you're not moving, you're sitting. We now call, and the joke among physicians is sitting is the new smoking. It has as much risk factor as smoking. Selective information inattention is a valuable skill. We are bombarded with information. Prayer and meditation and learning new adaptive skills. I would say your state of mind is the most important factor in the outcome of your life, other than being one of the elect. Social support is crucial for the maintenance of health, wellness, and brain health. Social support is a non-negotiable. A lot of people suffered badly during the pandemic, especially older people when they were isolated. And you heard really difficult stories of somebody who hadn't physically been touched by another human for 2 to 3 years. Find somebody who wants to work on increasing wellness with you. Now you've automatically formed a social connection. Why do you think it is in our church that we have Bible studies and Rachel organizes women's study? That part of that is the social connection of doing these things together. God created us to live in community. A McKinsey Health Institute survey of 21,000 adults across 21 countries found that having purpose in life and meaningful connections was among one of the most important factors bolstering health. So these are important factors. Now, what's interesting to me, and these are slides my daughter and I share, if you look at the spectrum of well-being, and this one kind of amazes me. I just tend to be an optimist. I get up out of bed in the morning. I can't wait to get going. There's so many things to do. There are people in my household who think I have ADD just because I'm involved in so many things, and I'm just energized by those kinds of things. But if you look at, we have the highest levels of education, the highest levels of wealth, some of the we have more freedoms than most any other time in history. Those are being impinged upon, but we've got a lot of good things, and yet only 17% of Americans are truly flourishing. How can that be? Why is that? Well, often I will tell you that one of the primary ingredients here is Romans 1. We have God engraved on our hearts. And when you ignore that, when you suppress that, you turn to other things, and those other things are unhealthy. It is not how we were created. Now, what is this state of flourishing that I mentioned? Flourishing is a state in which an individual feels positive emotion toward life and is functioning well psychologically and socially. I know it when somebody comes up to me, I know it in seconds. When I go into a waiting room and meet a patient, I know it in seconds. It's just obvious for the most part whether this is somebody who's really positive and functioning well. It is the opposite of this is languishing, and that's what we have too much of in our country. And the healthiest, happiest people are flourishing and experience this sense of flow where time just passes. I say all the time, I think part of my problem with sleep, how can it be 5 o'clock already? And we're going to have dinner and then go for a walk and then it's time to go to bed. It's not possible. I need more hours in the day before I'm tired. I'm going to go by here. Some other adaptive tools. You can actually learn resilience. We teach that in the military. Willingness to expend energy over the long run on intentional goals. Persistence is important. Excluding, as I said, and I mean this, negative, toxic people from your life. Leave it to us as pastors. That's, I don't give up on anybody. I don't exclude anybody. But as a rule of thumb, you don't need to put up with toxicity in people. You have to find a way to deal with that. It might be showing them a better way. It might be that this is a person who's never really experienced acceptance and love, and you might have a huge impact on that person's life. Build an army of others that support you. Understand this non-negotiable choice and consequence paradigm, and exclude the things that hamper your goals. I think one of the biggest things, one of the worst things in our society is the TV. People spend 6-8 hours with that thing on. That's why John Gardner, a psychologist at Yale, said we build our own prisons and we serve as our own jail keepers. Choices. Rule 8, maintain strength and flexibility. I know we're going a little over because I wanted to go slow to get all of this. Core strength, that's abdomen and back, is critical, or as I say, core. Resistance exercise prevents fall. 30% of women age 60 can't take a 15-pound weight and do this. So what happens when they stumble? They fall. They can't hold their own weight grabbing onto something. They fall, they break a hip. They break a hip, they go to surgery. They break a hip and go to surgery, they go to assisted living. They have complications. A number of them will not leave that situation. So prevention. Regular aerobic activity prevents diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, obesity. We talk in terms of 3 types of exercise. Aerobic, riding a bike, walking, running, those sorts of things. Resistance, that can be with bands, weights, body weight, and flexibility. My friend always says, motion is lotion and movement is medicine. And as I said, sitting is the new smoking. Now, if you look at participation in aerobic and muscle strengthening activities from 1999 to 2009, no increase. If I could extend this out based on the data that we're aware of, it's actually going down. People are gaining more weight in society, they are less active, and that's a problem for us as a society. If you look at cardiac fitness, let me show you something that might surprise you. better shape than the average American 35-year-old. There is decline with time. I can't do what I used to do. I could ride my bike 100 miles, and I can't do that now, not comfortably, not without hospitalization being involved. But the point is that if you're fit, even when you get quite older, 75, you can be healthier than the out-of-shape average younger American. If you look at physical activity and death rate, and there's no getting away from these data. And that's not to say that it's the absolute rule for everybody. Somebody always says to me, my grandfather smoked a pack a day and never did a lick of exercise. Okay, he was the 1 in 10 million, but the 9,999,000 all died prematurely and ended up in wheelchairs earlier than they needed to. So if you look at from inactive to vigorous activity, you see particularly, and this is what I want to encourage you with, you don't have to be doing the heavy exercise. Where is the benefit? It's from being inactive to light exercise. And you get a huge mortality benefit from that. The reality, as it's been said, is that there is no option where hard doesn't exist. It's hard to make changes. It's hard to develop new habits. It's hard to say no. You know, a lot of our social activity in the U.S. is organized around food, right? And there's nothing wrong. It's a good paradigm to break bread with one another. But we often go to restaurants where there is no healthy food there. And you're tired of yet another salad. And so you end up eating, you know, the high-fat, high-salt, high-sugar stuff because we tend to become almost addicted to that. Did any of you see the documentary Super Size Me? I commend it to you. They did pretty careful work. They got a volunteer, a young man, and he had to eat all of his meals at McDonald's. And whenever they asked, he had to say yes to the supersize and eat it. And they followed him over time. They followed his weight, his mental health, his blood markers of inflammation, lipids, liver enzymes. They all rapidly deteriorated. Rule 9, there are only 10 here. Never ever use tobacco of any kind for any reason. If you do use tobacco, quit now, not later, because you may not have later. There is help and medications that are very helpful in quitting smoking. And tobacco is a defilement of your body and of your health. And then 10, spiritual health. I mentioned Romans 1. If you only read one chapter today in your Bible, read Romans 1. We were created as spiritual beings, and there's no getting away from that. We might suppress it, and Scripture says we do. As sinful humans, we all distort it and suppress it. Believing in something bigger than yourself turns out to have immensely positive health benefits. I think we end up with two choices to make this easy. We were created, there is order in the universe, and a plan for my life. That is, there is an eternal, significant outcome. Or, this is all random, there's no order, my life is meaningless, it doesn't matter what I do, and there are no eternal consequences. I see no middle ground. It is one or the other, even though we may not want to think of it as a black and white choice. It is. Romans 9, after Hosea 1, says this, those who were not my people, I will call my people, and her who was not beloved, I will call beloved. And in the very place where it was said to them, you are not my people, there they will be called, and I'll change it a bit, the sons and daughters of the living God. What's he saying there? there's only one person who can ever love perfectly, and he does so perfectly. Brennan Manning, a priest in the Catholic Church who was excommunicated because he was no longer willing to go with the traditions of Rome over what Scripture said, and battled alcoholism, wrote this: "The deepest desire of our hearts is for union with God. God created us for union with himself. This is the original purpose of our lives." Well, what does scientific data have to say about religion? Religious people are healthier, happier, and recover better from trauma. They are 3 times more likely to be alive 6 months after cardiac surgery. Again, I don't have a pill like that. They are 47% more likely to describe themselves as very happy. Social support and culture that encourages a healthier lifestyle. Phil and I were just talking about this at the break. Self-esteem, unconditionally valued, loved, and cared for by God. And find and create meaning in life's events. They are not meaningless. They are not capricious and arbitrary. And to focus beyond ourselves. If I had to put it bluntly, the U.S. is a pathologically narcissistic society. The physician viewpoint. We think about 70 to 80% of human disease is related to lifestyle and the choices we make. In the U.S., by the age of 50, 70%, 75% of Americans are taking medication for chronic diseases. Dementia, obesity, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, joint disease rates are soaring. Wellness, I would maintain, is a spectrum and a choice. Let me make it super simple. Eat less, move more, love others, sleep well. Those are the pillars as condensed as I know to make it. C.S. Lewis said this: every time you make a choice, you are turning the central part of you, the part of you that chooses, into something a little different from what it was before. And we get 1,000 times a day get to make a choice of something better or something worse, not based on our feelings, but on what Scripture tells us. That is my highest medical source book, is Scripture. Now, some of you may not want to have a healthy lifestyle, and I honestly go through this discussion with patients. Where it happens the most is smoking. And they say, "Doc, I do not want to give up smoking." And I say, "Okay, let me describe the 2 choices, and I'm going to write down in my chart the choice you've made, because I know what's going to happen the day that we sit down and I got to give you bad news. So let's be very clear about the choice, because we can never go back. Once it happens, you can never go back. You can try to improve from there, but you can't go back to original. So never exercise. It wastes time that could be spent worrying. Eat whatever you want, but limit fruits and vegetables if you have to eat them. Avoid doing anything weird like deep breathing, lifting weights, walking, biking. And isolate yourself. Social support and friendship is unnecessary. Never ask for help, because that's weak. Don't laugh. That wastes time. Make everything that goes wrong around you your fault. Really personalize it. Let's skip that one. Embrace perfectionism. Really ruminate about things in your life and dwell on the negative. My daughter, if I can use some of her advice, has her patients keep a gratitude journal. There's a lot to grouse about, and I'm easy to fall into that. But I do a 30-minute prayer walk every morning. You guys get prayed for by me every day as our corporate body. And when you start thinking about gratitude and the things that you have rather than the things that aren't right, it helps. maintain paralysis. Don't take any active steps to change, and reject expert advice, especially if it doesn't fit with what you want to believe. Well, illusions are the truths we live by until we know better. And now you know. So how can you keep your brain healthy and rejuvenate? Don't retire. Keep doing something. Other than the Levite priest, there is no example in the Bible of retirement. Now, I don't mean you have to work for money, but doing something that's productive. It might be reading at a grade school. It might be coming alongside people as you walk. I have found that extremely effective. When people don't really know who you are, I'm always shocked at how much they open up to me. I only have to ask one or two probing questions, and half the time we end up in tears. That's how close to the surface many people's trauma and needs are. Look forward, not backward. Exercise, the healthy lifestyle we talked about. Keep your social circle new and exciting. Don't reject people who don't automatically believe what you believe. Spend time with people younger than yourself. See your doctor. Tell him or her they're doing a good job. Don't think of yourself as old. I'm going to pause on that one. Don't think of yourself as old. That's a debilitating habit and pattern. Appreciate your cognitive strengths. There's nobody in here. I mean, I've had the privilege of getting to know a lot of you in some really deep ways. And I never cease to be amazed at the things you've done, the things you've accomplished, the thoughts and questions that you have. I don't think I leave church here Sunday without somebody from Sunday school asking me a question that I go home and I got to research. I got to figure this out. This is a really good question, and I don't really have a clear, articulable answer. And I think that's good for them, and it's good for me. And then promote cognitive health by doing new things. Now, just briefly, some things that are coming that you'll begin hearing about. Senolytics. This is a new class of medicine that already in animals, so to speak, reverses aging. Did any of you see that movie Cocoon, where they got into the pool? I can't wait for that. That's maybe what heaven's going to be like, right? But these are medications that actually seem to reverse aging. We are still doing a lot of work with these. Studies are going on with humans at Mayo Clinic. I myself have done a study with a senolytic and response to influenza vaccine. And we are able to improve the immune response to influenza vaccine compared to older people not taking this drug. Where will that lead? We don't know. Medications. Now I'm going to get into areas I think are potentially dangerous. And I'm a little negative here because I don't think as a species we've demonstrated the capacity to figure out the good and exclude the bad. Medications are being used in the military now for memory enhancement, attention span, and some plus minus effects on what are called microdosing with some of these medications. I have a son who's a pilot. You'll probably be shocked to know that when they're deployed in a war zone, they're taking speed because you can't keep your attention long enough. I don't like it. I've gone to the Pentagon. I've complained to the Air Force Surgeon General, and they don't care what I think. Bionics and neural implants. I don't know if this is the revelation equivalent of, are you going to be willing to have a neural implant, a chip implanted in your brain that will give you access to information you will need in our society to buy and sell? I don't know how far that's going to be taken. Our AI-enabled transhumanism. I don't know if you've heard about transhumanism. Man has presumed that they can make human parts and body better than God did. And so there is active discussion of whether or not for certain athletes we would remove their healthy legs and to enable them to have prostheses where you can run faster than with a human leg. We're already doing it with transgenderism. And then other things that will come along. A couple of quick things and then I'm done. I'm a vaccinologist, so this really caught my eye. This was a retrospective cohort observational study. So they look back in time. Observational studies are full of confounders, okay? They looked at the proportion of subjects who were Alzheimer's disease free, looking back 2 years, so they already knew they were healthy. And they looked at vaccinated and unvaccinated people who developed Alzheimer's disease after following them forward for 8 years. If they got their tetanus vaccines, there was a 30% reduction in dementia. If they got their shingles vaccine, a 25% reduction. Pneumococcal vaccine, a 27% reduction. Now, let me get to the next thing. This is not meant to be political. COVID has become highly politicalized in our environment. I'm just wanting to give you information for you to make choices with. I'm not telling you what to do. This is the largest study that's been done in this topic. This is 800,000 people from every walk of life in England. With each COVID infection, depending on the severity of it, they lost 2 to 9 IQ points with each COVID infection, okay? If they were admitted to the hospital or intensive care unit, it was more severe. There is a lot of concern. I'm pulling up the cover for you to look inside the tent. There is a tremendous concern among neurologists that we are going to face an accelerated epidemic of premature dementia because of the pandemic and what COVID-19 virus does to the brain. This 7 to 9 point, even, let me just show you, even people who had symptoms but no respiratory symptoms, or who had respiratory symptoms but not sick enough that they needed any assistance, they still lost measurable IQ points. How much? This might surprise you. The loss in IQ was larger than the mean deficit in IQ of 480 people who had previously had a stroke and the 998 who had learning disabilities. So you take what happens to the normal human brain with aging and you pair it with a decrease in IQ points, you're accelerating learning disabilities and dementia. And that's what the big, big concern is. Because right now, for the most part in the US, hardly anybody takes precautions, whether it's vaccine, masking, isolation. You may have seen what CDC did 2 days ago with eliminating isolation with the required isolation after infection. So I will end there knowing that we went longer, but I wanted to go slower and be sure I said this in a way that was clear. So now ask me anything you want to ask, and as I said, I'm willing to